Well, good Sunday evening, everyone. It is Sunday, January the 31st. That would make it the last day of January. Can you believe it? January is gone now. And when we wake up tomorrow, it's going to be February the 1st. My goodness, I was going to say chapter 2021. The year 2021 is already off to a fast start. Well, anyway, I'm glad that you joined me for Bible study today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate the fact that you tune in, that you open your Bibles, that you're not neglecting Bible study during this period when we're not able to be together in person. I'm so encouraged by that. I'm so encouraged by the kind words that I get, emails, the kind words when we do come together on Sunday morning. I'm so glad that many of you appreciate these moments that we have together and that you're getting something out of it. That really encourages me. Okay, chapter 24. Let's jump right in. Chapter 24, beginning in verse 17. We're going to see how far we get. I was hoping that we would finish the book of Proverbs at the end of February. That's going to be the end of our quarter, and we're going to get really close. I don't know if we'll get completely through it, but we're going to get really close if we don't. And as we get back together, Lord willing, for in person, beginning in March, we are going to begin a new and a different study on Sunday evenings. But for now, verse 17, chapter 24, do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and do not let your heart be glad when he stumbles, or the Lord will see it and be displeased and turn his anger away from him. This is the 28th of the 30 sayings. If you've been with us, I told you that we began a section over in chapter 22 that was 30 sayings, and this is number 28 here in verse 17 and 18. And the point is really simple. Don't gloat over an enemy's downfall. It's all about humility. God has always expected his people in every circumstance to maintain a humble spirit. And that even includes in victory over an enemy. After all, we realize that even in victory, it wasn't through our own power and our own might that we accomplished, but it was by the wonderful grace of God that we experienced victory. And so don't gloat over an enemy's downfall. Okay, let's look at verse 19 and 20. This is saying number 29. According to my numbering. Do not fret because of evildoers, or be envious of the wicked, for there will be no future for the evil man. The lamp of the wicked will be put out. This is a really important piece of counsel here. Do not fret because of evildoers. Now, I'm not sure what your translation says. Mine, of course, is the New American Standard. Do not fret. But a lot of commentators say that translation is just too mild. Don't fret. That is pretty mild. The idea here is, they say, not so much fretting as it is being infuriated. Infuriated is a whole lot more serious than fretting. And that seems to be the idea here. Don't be infuriated because of evildoers. Don't let yourself get infuriated by them. What he's saying is basically this. Raging against evil is pointless. Now, we're all to some extent going to express our concern when evil seems to be running amok. We're all going to, express our dismay and our frustration when it looks like those leading us have absolutely no respect for God's basic principles. We're going to express that. So that's normal and that's natural. But the idea here is don't let that, normal, reasonable concern and expression of concern become just almost incessant rage. just being infuriated, living in an infuriated state. You just are consumed by the thoughts of it. You rage about it at any time that you have the opportunity. What he's saying is, listen, that doesn't do any good. It's impotent, if you will. There's nothing you can do about it. So being infuriated because of the evil around you and just living in that constant state is just pointless, and it's unnecessary. Also, equally pointless is envying the wicked. That's pointless. You shouldn't envy them. Being infuriated, envy them. Both are pointless because, what he says in verse 20, there will be no future for the evil man. God's going to take care of it. God's going to deal with them. Don't envy them. God's going to take care of that. If you envy them and want to be like them, then you're going to be on the receiving end, the business end of God's judgment. You don't want to be there. You know, things may look pretty good for them right now, but don't forget, verse 20, there is no future for the evil man. God is going to deal with it. The other part of verse 20, the lamp of the wicked, this is the future. The lamp of the wicked will be put out. That's what he means. There will be no future. Their lamp's going to be put out. No matter how brightly it seems to be shining now, it's not going to last. God's going to deal with it. So there's no need to envy them. And there's no need to live in this constant state of impotent fury. God's going to handle it. Yes, be concerned. Yes, you don't turn a blind eye to it. Yes, if it's running rampant in your community, we have every reason and every right to demand that our leaders deal with evil and not let it run rampant. And to make sure we put people in office who's going to take evil seriously and take seriously their role ordained by God to be a deterrent of evil. And that's Romans chapter 13. And so, yes to all that, but don't just be constantly in a state of anxiety because of the evil around you. It hasn't escaped God's notice, and He's going to take care of it. In the words of the writer here, the lamp of the wicked will be put out. Okay. Let's look at verse 21 and 22. We have come to the end of these 30 sayings. This is saying number 30. My son, fear the Lord and the king. Do not associate those with those who are given to change, for their calamity will rise suddenly, and who knows the ruin that comes from both of them. He's saying here, and this is a principle again that runs all through Scripture, and that is God and the king are sustainers of justice. At least that is the ideal. God and the king are sustainers of justice, and we need to submit ourselves to moral governance. It is the best way to live in a community that is peaceful and secure. When he talks about do not associate with those who are given to change, this doesn't mean, when we live in a place like we do, where we, have a voice in our government. It's government for the people and by the people. Make your voice known. Choose your leaders. You have a choice. That kind of change. But that's not what this is talking about. This was talking about in a day and age where it wasn't government by the people and for the people. This is talking about those given to change. These are people who are subverting the king. These are people who are trying to overthrow the king and install, their own leaders. And so basically what he's saying here is a principle that we've seen all throughout Scripture, and that is God's people are expected to respect moral governance. We are expected to acknowledge its legitimacy, and we are expected to be law-abiding citizens. When we do that, then we are going to have a much greater possibility of, as I said, living in a place that is characterized by peace and security. Okay. And that brings us to the end of those 30 sayings, but it doesn't bring us to the end of chapter 24. Now we begin in verse 23, and as we go from verse 23 all the way through verse 34, we have two particular themes that are being addressed. One is law courts, and the other is, that recurring theme of laziness. That recurring theme of laziness. I guess one of the great temptations of young people, and remember, the Proverbs is essentially all about someone giving counsel to their son. And so apparently one of the great temptations has always been for young people to be a little bit on the lazy side. And so there's a lot of counsel about laziness. We've already seen a lot. We're about to see a lot here, or more here, as we finish up chapter 24. But before we get to that, let's start with the law courts, verse 23. These are the sayings of the wise. To show partiality in judgment is not good. He who says to the wicked, "You are righteous," peoples will curse him, nations will abhor him. But to those who rebuke the wicked will be delight, and a good blessing will come upon them. He kisses the lips who gives a right answer. Okay, let's look at those verses 23 through 26. The whole idea here, the whole point here is there should be no prejudice and no favoritism in communities that thrive. Justice truly is blind. In communities that are going to thrive and grow and develop and prosper, where there's going to be peace and prosperity and security, there has to be a legal system that can be trusted. And that means there has to be a legal system where there is no prejudice or favoritism. Now, let me say this. There is no perfect legal system. The reason there's no perfect legal system is because there are no perfect people. And so legal systems are made up of imperfect people. And so you're going to find occasionally some bad apples. Now, but as far as a system goes, the ideal of the system, the laws of that system, are the laws of that system, are the ideals of that system, and are the checks and balances to try to make sure that those laws are respected and carried out. Are those in place? That's what you want. That is what you want. And that's what he said. That's the kind of person, that's the kind of system that we want. To show partiality in judgment is not good. People ask, you hear a lot about, questions about legal system and justice system in the United States. And we should always, every nation should always be taking a look at its system to ensure that it is as fair and equitable as it can be. That is always appropriate. It is always, and if we take things like this seriously, we will always be doing that. We want to make sure it is as fair and as equitable as it can be. And with that said, people say, what do I think of our jurisprudence system? Basically, I think it's the best in the world. And I don't think that would be really disputed. I think anyone who would try to dispute that would be trying to, build a straw man to to suggest it is something that it's really not. You see that from time to time. I do think overwhelmingly we work very hard in this country to make things fair and equitable. We should always be taking a look at it to make sure it's that way. And if it's not, and if there are people that are uncovered who are corrupting the system, they need to be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law, because there's a lot at stake when it comes to judicial systems. And so this principle is so important. That is one of the things that I think has made historically, as people look from the outside into our country, even with its warts, and everybody has warts, every country has warts, that they see a system that generally tries to reflect these principles. And I hope that the system will always try to reflect these principles. Now, I think there's a lot of people who are trying to promote principles that don't reflect true justice, and we've got to resist. Some of those voices are very shrill, and we've got to really resist that. We got to resist the pressure of to try to push us away from this into more of a system that is, a system of, just a system pushes us away from this. This is so critical. You see this theme over and over and over again. Any attempts at all to deceive the court and pervert justice will fail. When the upright man stands and gives a straight analysis of the case before other people. And that's what's important. That's what everybody should be about. What did you really see? What did you really hear? See, a lot of people want to, especially in our day and age, you know this as well as I do, there'll be maybe a short video clip, a short, and it can be, and it's not in a context, it's kind of in a vacuum. And you learn nothing about anybody. You don't learn anything about maybe officers. You don't learn anything about suspects. It's just a very short clip. And what people tend to do increasingly in our world, I think, is they try to make judgments based on that. That is not the principle of justice. That is not the principle of it. The principle of justice seeks to uncover the truth at all costs. And sometimes uncovering the truth means letting somebody go that we kind of wish in our heart wasn't let go, but the evidence is not there. Or sometimes it may be convicting someone that we really, in our heart emotionally wish wouldn't be convicted, but the evidence is there. To show partiality and judgment is not good. He who says to the wicked, "Oh, you're righteous," people will curse him, nations will abhor him. Nobody wants to live in a world like that. Nobody wants to live in a world like that. But those who rebuke the wicked will be a delight. That's the world we want to live in. We want to live in a place to where we actually believe that the truth will prevail when all the evidence is brought to bear. Look at verse 26. Let's look at that for a minute. This is an interesting statement. He kisses the lips who gives the right answer. What in the world does that mean? Well, I don't know what your translation says. The idea seems to be, though, kisses the lips in the sense of seals the lips. He seals the lips who gives a right answer. Now, in context, what the idea here is the person who gives the proper verdict, who tells the truth, ultimately results in sealing the lips of hostile people, those who are determined to lie and deceive and manipulate, those who give proper verdicts, those who care about justice and truth, no matter what, will seal the lips, will silence hostile lips. Okay, look at verse 27. Now we move from court stuff on law courts, verses 23 through 26, into this more discussion on laziness. 27, prepare your work outside and make it ready for yourself in the field. Afterwards, then build your house. Okay. Now, this doesn't address laziness in the direct terms that we're going to see here when we get to verses 30 through 34. But it relates to a really important principle. And that principle, you got to make sure you're seeing it right in context. If you look at this, if you kind of miss the context, it doesn't sound right. If you're giving financial counsel to someone, you're like, okay, good financial counsel. It's like, okay, as you're making out your budget, as you're trying to figure out what dollars you have, and where all your dollars are going, and you're trying to make sure that those dollars don't just needlessly go away from you to other people. Okay, let's do this budget. And the first things that you do is you make sure that you have, a roof over your head. You've got the lights on in your home. You've got food on the table, and you've got transportation that's going to get you from your home to your job to make money. Okay. Then after that, then everything else kind of falls. That's where the budget goes from there. But the first thing is the most essential things. But if you look at verse 27 here, it almost sounds like, it almost sounds like he's saying, housing and all, that's for down the road. Look at it again. Prepare your work outside. Make it ready for yourself in the field. Afterwards, then build your house. So we look at that and wait a minute, don't we kind of provide a shelter first? Got to get that shelter up, and then once we got our shelter up, then we can get to work. Well, yeah, that's normally true, but understand again what the context is here. The context is it's dealing with laziness, and what he means by this is that you shouldn't provide for personal comfort until a means of income has been established. That's the idea here. Don't put providing for your comfort before earning a living. You got to earn a living first, and then when you earn the living, then you provide. That's the idea here of building your house. It's not in the sense of a basic structure to shelter you from the elements. This is more build your house in the sense of a place of personal comfort. And so this is really, really important counsel. And it's really important for people starting out. It's really important for people who are not just starting out. It's really important for every stage of life. And, but a lot of people today want to consume before they produce. And remember, he's talking to his young son here. And a lot of times you'll kind of find that sometimes among young people, but you'll always find it among lazy people. Always. They want to consume, but they don't want to produce. And basically what verse 27 is saying is, produce first, and then you consume. That's what people do who aren't lazy. They produce, and then they consume. That's the natural order of things. Okay, look at verse 28. Do not be a witness against your neighbor. Oh, he's going back now to the courts. Now, he's going to get down to verse 30 and go right back into laziness. But verse 28 and 29, he's going back to the whole issue of law courts. So, I don't know, 28 and 29 really kind of should have been, 27 should have been after 29. But anyway. Do not be a witness against your neighbor without cause, and do not deceive with your lips. Do not say, thus I shall do to him as he has done to me. I will render to the man according to his work. Don't be a witness against your neighbor without cause, and do not deceive with your lips. Don't commit perjury. This is going back to everything that we've just said about justice, about favoritism, about a commitment to the principle of justice, to honesty, to integrity, to truth. And do not be a witness against your neighbor without cause. don't you lie about a situation because you think by doing so, it's going to ultimately be for your benefit. You know, there are a lot of people who will lie because they think the end justifies the means. And if I'll lie about this, then it will, get movement going toward an issue that needs to be dealt with so that later on down the road, things will be better. That's a lie. That's a lie. And there is no justification for a lie when it comes to the principles of justice. People's lives are at stake. And so, this idea that the end justifies the means, the end never justifies the means. The end, that's what people think when they abandon all respect for God's principles. The end justifies the mean. I will destroy someone now for the benefit of someone else later. No, that's not the principle of justice and righteousness. Do not be a witness against your neighbor without cause. Do not deceive with your lips. So don't commit perjury. Verse 29, do not say, thus I shall do to him as he has done to me. I will render to the man according to his work. Don't use courts as a tool for settling personal scores. That's what that means. Do you think anybody does that? I know the answer to that. You know the answer to that. Yeah, I think a lot of people use the courts as a tool to settle a personal score. But God says that's not what they're for. This is not what the court system is to be used for as a place of getting revenge. Okay, back to 30. Let's finish up chapter 24 here. We got about 3 minutes left. In verses 30 through 34, it's an example of a story in which the poet quotes a traditional proverb. The traditional proverb is in verses 33 through 34, the last 2 verses of the chapter, but it's set in this little story. Take a look at it. I passed by the field of the sluggard. That is, I passed by the field of the lazy person, and by the vineyard of the man lacking sense. That's the man lacking sense is the lazy person. I passed by the field of the sluggard and by the vineyard of the man lacking sense, and behold, it was completely overgrown with thistles. Its surface was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. All right. I went and I saw this place that was just awful. It wasn't cared for. It was overgrown. Nothing was maintained. Everything was in a state of decay. Everything was overgrown. Nature was reclaiming everything. Now, that's basically what you're going to see surrounding in the setting where laziness it thrives. That's what you're going to see. By the way, sometimes people will say, that's not fair because that could mean that a person is impoverished. I understand what you're saying. And I'm not going to make blanket general statements, but I will say this. Being poor it doesn't necessarily mean that you just neglect everything and you let everything just, be chaos and no order, no pride in appearance. It doesn't mean that at all. I've known plenty of people in my 54 years of life that didn't have a lot, but what they had, they maintained it. You could tell that they were orderly, and they took pride in what they did have, and what you'll find in a case like that is always on the other end of that is a person who is very hardworking. And so that's what the Bible says. I passed by the field of a sluggard. And by the vineyard of man lacking sense, and behold, it was completely overgrown with thistles, and its stone wall was broken down. Things weren't maintained, things weren't kept. And when I saw it, he says, I reflected on it. I looked, and I received instruction. That is so true. You know, instruction doesn't always come via this medium right here. It doesn't always come that way. It doesn't always come from somebody telling you something. Sometimes instruction comes, and sometimes the best instruction comes from seeing something. You see what someone has done, and we've seen this principle already in the book of Proverbs. You watched a decision that someone has made, and you go, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Boy, look at the disaster that turned out to be for them. And this is one of those cases. You look at that and you go, yeah. I looked at that and I received instruction. Well, what instruction did they receive? Well, then it comes to verse 33 and 34, where he quotes the traditional proverb. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, then your poverty will come as a robber, and your want, that is your destitution, like an armed man. So he sees this. He sees the field of a man who is lazy, and it's overgrown. It's not producing anything. Its walls are falling down. It's not being maintained. And he says, I remember the proverb. It is so true that with a little sleep, a little slumber, that is with laziness, a little folding of the hands with laziness, you will be impoverished. Your impoverishment will take you down like an armed man. So it's a neat little story here, an example story. Okay, well, that gets us through chapter 24. We'll pick up at chapter 25 next week. When we do that, we're going to see that chapter 25 through 29 constitutes really kind of a separate book within the book of Proverbs. But really, as far as material goes, it is nothing different. And we will take a look at that beginning next Sunday, the first Sunday in the month of February. Thanks for tuning in today or tonight. I hope you have a wonderful day. Hope to see you really soon. In the meantime, take care and God bless.